And today we've got Bobby, so thank you so much for coming along today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honoured, honestly.
Nice.
I've never been called a hero by anyone.
You know what, make the most of it, just readily being a hero. So, I suppose the first question is, with your career, you've gone from QA role back in 2009 to a company founded today, and in between you've had various roles such as producer, content manager, director of content, VP of partnerships. Can you explain sort of like your career journey, how you made those changes and why you made those changes?
Yep, sure. So at first it was really haphazard. I wasn't in the games industry at first. I started as being an antique dealer. And I also worked for Casio, crunching numbers for stock and sales and stuff. And I worked in production, making TV commercials. I did like quite a few different things. And then eventually, through a conversation with my wife, it became clear. Well, she made it clear to me. She was like, you like games. That's what you do. And I was like, that's a really good idea. Eventually, it dawned on me it was a good idea. It took a few conversations. I was like quite stuck in thinking, I'm stubborn. So I was like, no, I'm happy. I'm happy with where I am. But eventually she convinced me, or she made me realise. And so I joined the industry wanting to be a producer. Started off in QA, and then eventually became an associate producer. And that felt like oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm actually heading towards that goal. But when I did production, and eventually I was a senior producer, I was like, this is not what I want. It's something else. And I wanted to understand more about how decisions are being made around games. Like why certain games are being cancelled, why certain games are being greenlit, what the executives are thinking. So I kind of lent into that and then became like a publishing manager. Got really good exposure in terms of those decision-making processes and the kind of strategy and process around game development, or publishing rather. And then after a few years I was like, this is too far removed from making games. I want to be talking to developers, not just talking about process and thinking about ROI and stuff. So then I became a game scout and I was looking for games. Did that for about 4 or 5 years at Sega. And then I left Sega because I was like, I want to build my own business. But at Sega I was very in a line. I was in my own swimming lane of this is what you do. It was quite a big organisation. So I joined Curve Games as VP of Partnerships, where I was able to do more. Things that I would never be allowed to do at Sega, like redraft the legal agreement of publishing. In fact, the legal team would take care of that at Sega. But at Curve, it's like, go nuts, right? So I was able to do a lot of different things. So I went from PlayStation, super big company, to Sega, quite a big company but smaller, and then to Curve, which is also about 1,000 people in the group, but way smaller, and then now a tiny team of just me and my founder there, Simon, who's wearing the glasses, looking smart. Please talk to Simon afterwards. But yeah, it's kind of so I've gone gradually to smaller companies, but just kind of growing in my remit, and then now founding this company.
And what knowledge would you say that journey has provided for you as a founder now? What have you taken from these various roles?
So it's a bit I don't know, like everything. The film Slumdog Millionaire, it's like his journey, right? Everything kind of just came together. And for me, it's if you think about the value chain of game development or game publishing, it's kind of sourcing games, scout it, then secure it, do the negotiation, then do the development, i.e. help with production and everything, and then do the QA. So it feels like I've kind of gone through the value chain of game publishing. I haven't touched community, or marketing, branding, but kind of touched on key points that you'd require to get the game from the very beginning all the way to shipping.
So it's more that you have an overall understanding of what it is to make a game, and that's what you can bring to it. You know what other people you can sort of forward think what other people might want from you or what to expect.
I think so. It's kind of in Japan, I'm half Japanese. In Japan, quite often, people don't move companies, and the way that they retain their staff quite often is they'll go along this kind of career path of not sticking to one discipline, but making that person go through different things. It's crazy when you think about it. that just doesn't happen over here, right? Over here we specialise, we become really good at what we do, and we get more and more senior in that role. Whereas in Japan, you become a jack of all trades, and eventually you're at the kind of top of the hierarchy. Well, that's the dream. And I've kind of like fallen into that in a way, kind of thing. It wasn't the intention, but that's just how it kind of happened.
And obviously within all the roles, project management is such a critical part of it. And in particular, it's that long-term planning as well. And I think that's what a lot of game developers can struggle with, is that long-term planning. So have you got any advice, like how you manage that?
Yeah, it's tricky, because each organisation is different, they have different cultures, right, different behaviours, and the industry is really dynamic, things change all the time. But like, what's worked for me in terms of kind of keeping that North Star, you know, like making sure that you're delivering against it, is being really clear and aligned within the team, getting everyone involved, collaborate, and making sure you're talking about it frequently, like at least once a month, right, in terms of what that longer term objective is, and reminding yourself of what it is really helpful, as well as everyone else, and adapting it if need be. But typically, if you've got a really good long-term planning or plan, goal, mission, whatever values, then that stuff doesn't really change, but it's more the tactics that have to be kind of constantly kept in check.
And sort of moving on to present day with Kando Factory. So Kando is a Japanese word. Can you explain what that means and why you decided to name your company that?
Yeah, so Kando Factory is like, it's got two meanings to me, or to us. So like, as we grow older, we become a lot more risk averse, and we see the stop signs, right? We become really quite pessimistic. It's like, no, I've tried that, no, I'm not going to do that, right? And you kind of just become not so innovative or creative. So having a can-do attitude is important, and being not fearful of change or innovation and really going for it. I think there was that meaning, as well as the Japanese meaning, or the Japanese word of Kando. And Kando is two words. In Japan we use, like, you know, the Chinese characters, and it's two separate Chinese characters. The first character means, directly translated, means feeling, and the second character means move. So it's when you're moved emotionally, when you're like really, really moved. It could be something, quite often it's not a word that I don't think it really exists in English, but in Japanese quite often it's tied with when something is so heartwarming or so heartbreaking that it brings you to tears. It's just like a really moving, emotional experience. That stuff. So we want to provide that experience, hence Kando Factory.
And you've kind of touched on it a little bit when we were talking about your career journey, but why is now the right time to set up a company?
That's a good question.
Now
it's the worst time. No, it's the worst time to set up a company. 2 years ago would have been great. But at the moment, not a great time to be a founder. But for me, like, so macro level, not great, but for me personally, it was the right time. It was kind of like, the trade-off is, do I stay in a safe job and be a salaryman and continue, right, and be paid and have all the security and all the like side benefits, and increase my buffer so one day when I do that I have a bigger kind of war chest. But then the trade-off is I'm getting older and I'll probably have less stamina, and it will probably make my hunger to do it, that will probably decrease. So I just felt like, no, this isn't right.
And you said about stamina then, you know, when we were having the chat setting up this hub called Hero, you were on about, you know, how you've bootstrapped for the company. So can you explain what you've done so far, what you plan to do, and what really is the benefits and challenges of bootstrapping in the games industry?
Yeah, so we're bootstrapping, and you know, like that game, the handmade game, you know, massively bootstrapping. It's just like that. Like right now, an example of bootstrapping is, like today I brought the business cards for my co-founder, and I've got my business cards on me, and we just got it from my brother who's got a printing company. So he's just like made these amazing business cards for us that I didn't have to pay for. It's like, fantastic! Good thing, right? So activate your network. Like a couple of weeks ago I went to Nordic, and you know, the ticket for that is like 600 euros. Got it for free. And then I stayed at a friend's house, crashed out on his couch, got that for free. So it just cost me the flight, right? So it's kind of like, just try to activate your network where it's possible, where you're not taking the piss completely. And you know, you can still do it. You can do it without having to pay through the nose. You can actually make stuff happen. So like, for example, the next event that I'll be going to, or you know, there's like a few events that we've booked in. But right now we're talking about going to Argentina to an event called EVA, where I'm saying, yeah, I'll do a talk, and in exchange they're kind of paying for flight and accommodation and everything. So it's kind of like, there's ways that you can get about doing your business. For me, it's critical to go to these events, to network, and find clients, and pitch, and all of that stuff. So yeah, finding ways to cut costs, but still do things properly, I think is important.
And you mentioned going to Argentina. Why in particular Argentina?
So Argentina's a great place in terms of game development. Actually, it's up and coming, same as Brazil. I see them as like really, really interesting places. Like they've got influence. I think it's because of where they're placed geographically in the world. I don't know what it is, but they get influences from the East in terms of the content that they're absorbing, and the influences from the North, from America, from the West, effectively. So they've got like this really interesting kind of stuff coming out of those countries. It's really cool. And the costs are lower, which is helpful.
And for the majority of your games career, about a slight year in Liverpool, you've been based in London. What does London provide as a games hub, or like a place to make games? What does London provide?
I think it's really different to the rest of the UK. It's where no one is a minority on a day-to-day level. Everyone's got a voice. It's so compact. There's so much going on. Like this, right? If I was in Liverpool, I'd have to take the train down, consider staying the night before going back, potentially. Whereas because I live here, I can just come here and go back, right? Yeah, there's just so much going on. I think it's a great place. It would be nice if there was like more funding that I could access because I'm in London, because it's so expensive here.
But it's good in general, just like events, and like you said, the networking is so important, and it's great to sort of connect with people and not necessarily, you know, there's so much going on.
Yeah,
you can just
absolutely.
tap into certain bits.
Totally. And everyone's from everywhere, so it's like that diversity. I think is really cool.
So on the inspiration side as well. Yeah. And the final question is, what is next for you in Kando?
Yeah, so like right now we're acting as consultants and as agents for game developers who are looking for funding and a publisher. So that's what we're kind of doing right now. So if you're a developer looking for funding and a publisher, let me know, or let Simon know after this. And then in the future, what we want to do is we want to turn into a publisher ourselves. So yeah, that's the dream. So we're kind of working towards that.
Thank you so much. Has anybody got any questions? Yeah.
So, what services do you offer to the small developer? What do you actually do? So,
in terms of the specific services we offer, I've reviewed about 20,000 game pitches. So, I think I know what a good game pitch is. So I can give feedback on pitches. I've looked at a lot of contracts, so I can give advice on contracts. I'm not a lawyer, but I can give really good advice on contracts. And then across the team, there's people who can do market research, consumer research, can provide forecasting and benchmarking of the game, brand kind of positioning, marketing strategy. We've got someone that does tech, someone that does production. So like we've got kind of what you need to be a publisher almost, but as someone that's helping you secure a deal with a publisher, we're going to essentially build a pitch deck that makes the publisher, it makes their job really easy to say yes and champion you internally. Because it's not that person that has to say yes, they need to convince a whole other bunch of people to say yes, right? So by making this kind of pitch deck that they would have to create internally, if I could just do the job for them almost, it makes their job a lot easier to say, yeah, let's get this going.
Any more questions? Okay.
Right, so you talked about like back in Japan, it's like people come like jack of trades, and I don't know if that's how you class like your journey and how you've done things, but do you think the moving around and kind of like moving in, like shifting into different roles, is that kind of you have to like let go of egos and mindset, you have to deprogram yourself to be willing to kind of like start over again in that kind of way. Like, can you speak about that sort of process? Cultural?
Yeah, no, totally. You end up becoming like a total newbie, right? And you know nothing, and you should probably know more. So you have this massive imposter syndrome of like, oh my god, now I need to know this. But yeah, like you basically have to constantly learn and constantly improve and challenge yourself. Like for me, I lost a lot of my industry first. We were talking about that with Simon, right? We were talking about it together. We're like, yeah, like been to Gamescom, E3, done all this, signed my first deal, seen my game released. Like, and you're just kind of going through the motions at that point, and it's not so exciting anymore. But then now, for me today, it's like, oh my god, everything's brand new. Like this is my first talk that I'm doing as Kando Factory, and earlier I gave my business card to Elaine, and I was like, this is my first business card that I'm giving to someone. Like there's so many firsts again, and I feel like I have to relearn everything and try and use everything I already know that's transferable. But yeah, everything's brand new again. So it's, yeah, you have to constantly learn, I think, if that's the approach you want to take.
Here's Bob.
So, as a game developer or even someone who wants to become a publisher, what are the key things you would advise them to do to become investor ready or publisher ready?
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? That's a big question. I think you need to make sure that you know who you're serving, because we all serve someone, right? And the person that you, or the group that you want to serve, you need to make sure you're a good fit. What does that mean? And be ready for whatever that relationship is. So it's a tricky one to say tactically, very specifically what, but I think you need to be really clear about who you are and who that partnership that you're building with, what is that, and be ready for that. So like if you're a developer that's looking to be publisher ready, depending on your situation, it differs what you must have to be publisher ready. So if you've got a huge track record, like let's say you shipped Vampire Survivors, and your next game is, I don't know, like Vampire Survivors 2, then really, you don't really need a build for Vampire Survivors 2. You can just go there with a pitch, a concept, and you will get investment. But if you're like, actually this time I want to make Midnight Club Legends or something, right? And I'm going to get the license from whoever, Criterion, and like do something completely different, then it's like, dude, you need to make sure you've got that license secured already, you need to make sure you've got a build, because it's completely different to what you did before. And have a really strong pitch deck to go along with it, so it's kind of, and be quite big budget naturally with the license and stuff. So it's kind of, depending on your situation, what you need becomes really quite different.
Woo. I'm going to wrap it up here. We've got pizzas and drinks outside, but thank you so much, Bobby, for coming along to be our whole hero today. And thank you to Barclays as well for being our partner. And thank you to everybody who's coming along to join us today. Thank you so much.